Good afternoon, believers. Today we're going to be talking about this Instagram post. Check your intentions. And so I quoted 1 Samuel 16:7 today. It's the beginning of one of my favorite Bible characters' stories. It's the story of David. And so what does it mean to check your intention? And so if anybody who's known me or who's followed my blogs or has sat in on any of my Bible studies, David is one of my favorite characters because he's considered a man after God's own heart. But it's not because David is perfect. It's because David's intention is only to please God. David lives his life in service to God, and in the battles that he faces and the steps that he takes, he always makes sure that he consults God, except for this one instance. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about before David became king. Before David becomes king, he has to be chosen. And so what happens with the children of Israel specifically is that God hadn't given them a king. He had given them prophets and judges to rule over them, men and women of God that he spoke to directly on behalf of the people to give them direction and to guide them into where he needed them to be. But the people weren't satisfied with hearing directly from God. Everybody else had a king. They wanted a king too. And so God allowed for the prophet at the time, Samuel, to pick the first king, to pick Israel's first king. And he picked Saul. And Saul fell out of favor with God because he was only human. And Samuel picked Saul off of his appearance. He was a good warrior. He was handsome. And so Samuel assumed, and he was one of the children of God. So it was like, this got to be it. This has to be the king God has for the people. But Saul fell out of favor because he was disobedient. God gave him specific instruction. And Saul was like, my way is better. And so I'll teach it if you want me to. But the point I'm trying to make is that the people of Israel, they needed a new king. And so God told Samuel to go to Jesse, one of the shepherds in one of these towns. And God told Samuel that he was going to pick a king. And so Samuel goes in and he sees all of Jesse's sons, and he's like, this one, he's handsome, he's strapping. This one, he looks like this, he looks like that. And then God was telling him, not that one, not this one, not that one. And he goes through all the sons that are in the house, and they're like, is there any more? Is there anyone else? Because God sent me here. The king is here. None of these is it. And so they're like, we just have the youngest. He's in the shepherd minding the sheep. He said, bring him here. David, little shepherd boy, was the king, was the king that God chose. And why? Because his heart was pure. And so even as David rules the people of Israel, his heart remains pure. He has good intentions. He falls, he fails, he sins before God and before the people of Israel, so much so that he has to live out the consequences of his actions in very public ways. But even after all this, God has declared him a man after his own heart. And that's what I strive to be. And that's what we all should strive toward. We should strive towards pure intention, that let the words of our mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in God's sight, because he is our strength, because he is our redeemer. And so this is what it means to check your intention. Check your heart. Where's your heart at? How's your heart postured before God? This is how we know that we're walking in his will. And this is how we know that we're on the proper path to peace. Because the peace that Christians have, that peace that surpasseth all understanding, comes from knowing that you've done all you can to be obedient to God, his word, and his will. And that's what it means to check your intention. Make sure that the things that you are doing, where your heart is, where your mind is, the words that you say are coming from the purest place, the truest place within yourself, and within God's will. And that's what I have for you today. I want you to remember to be great and to stay humble and to stay tuned.